Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. My name is Brendan Decora, and each week I'll be hosting different guests, mainly engineers and producers, but also people from across the industry. Enjoy the show. On today's show, we have Victor Indrizzo. He's a session drummer who's played with artists such as Avril, Lavigne, Alanis, Morissette, and Lizzo. Check it out. First and foremost, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And I just want to premise this by saying this is actually the third time we've recorded this.
This is the third time.
Yes, we've had technical difficulties both other times. However, we've got a new camera set up and everything's going to be so much better. So yeah. I'm glad that we're able to do it right.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. I'd like to start, if you want to go through your backstory, kind of how you got to where you are.
How did I get to where I am? Well, I started playing as a kid. I just was obsessed with music really early on. Mm-hmm. It was my escape.
Right.
I had a very kind of funky childhood, and so music was really like this weird little dream world that I could escape to. And mm-hmm. I think I grew up in a really great time, like the 70s and into the 80s, like where music was just so exciting. You go to a record store, you know, and if you caught a glimpse of somebody, it was from a magazine, and you had to wait, and there was this amazing anticipation about it, and it was exciting and mysterious. Mm-hmm. And even at an early age, I would read album covers. Right. And credits.
Yeah, all the liner notes. Yeah.
And I would just dream of, like, you know, who are these people and how are they so lucky? Mm-hmm. and reading about the studios. And then my family moved to California, and I was so excited to be here because a lot of the labels and the studios were here that I would read. Yeah. And one of the first things I did as a kid when I got here was I got the yellow pages out and I looked up Capitol Records. Right. And I called them and asked them how much it was to make a record. And the receptionist who answered started laughing, and she could tell that I was a little kid.
Right.
She was like,
how old were you?
I think maybe 9 or 10, like I was little. Okay. And she started laughing. She's like, "It's a lot of money, honey." Yeah. And then I was like, not being discouraged, I said, "Well, then how much to make a 45?" Right. Because I was like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And I think initially my dream was to be in a band. Mm. I didn't really ever think about being a session guy. Right. And, you know, I grew up like not taking lessons. My family was pretty poor, and so I didn't even get a real drum set till much later on. So it was like playing on pillows and trash cans and stuff like that. And then starting out in bands. But by way of, like, you know, a lot of people, we would make 4-track demos, or I would go to people's places to record. And I learned very early on that it was important to play to a click track. I remember reading in Modern Drummer. Right. There was like a studio drummer roundtable, and they were talking about that and all the various ways you could play with it. And I really took that to heart. Mm-hmm. So I think when I was like 18 or 19, I got in a band and we got signed. And I was obsessed with, like, not being replaced. I was like, I want to play on this record, because I already knew by that time from reading so many articles that if you couldn't cut it, you couldn't play to a click, you were not going to play on your record. Yeah. And so crazy. I would sleep with a metronome. I was like,
really? Yeah. Jeez.
I was really obsessed. Like, I was like, I want to have that down. And you know, my poor brothers, like, we shared a room, and so, like, they all have awesome time. Like, yeah,
that's awesome.
But that thing, and then, you know, after being in a series of bands that didn't work out, or, like, you know, we would get signed, get so far, and it would fall apart. Yeah. It was interesting because a lot of my friends in those bands would be like, oh, okay, well, now it's time to go another path, get a real job or something. But I was so obsessed. I was like, this can't be it. Yeah. I love this so much. And so just kind of by way of playing on demos or, like, people's records, like, at first here and there, you meet an engineer, you meet a producer. Right. Matter of fact, I think one guy that I still work with a lot is Joe Ciccarelli. And I met Joe Ciccarelli when I was like 24 years old. Wow. It was the first time I did a record with him.
And he was recording your band, or
no? It was an instance where I got called. They didn't have a drummer.
Okay.
And so I played on this record. And,
nice.
And that was it. Just like, you know, you meet people. And for me, I didn't think that I was going to be honestly good enough to be a studio guy.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't. I think because I didn't go to school for it.
Okay.
I didn't learn to read music till much later on, like in my 40s, actually.
Wow. Dang.
Yeah. Yeah, I just didn't have that confidence in it, or I just thought, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's funny, I was never that guy that was so sure of myself or thought I was all that. And yet, like, I loved it so much, though, I didn't let that stop me. I just...
Right.
I think I had the Charlie Bucket syndrome, which is the kid from Willy Wonka, where he just wanted it so bad. I always kind of related to that. Yeah. It's like, you know,
there's no plan B.
There was no plan B for me.
Right.
Yeah. And
I find that's, you know, myself included, like the people that become successful in this industry kind of have to be that way. You know, it's like,
I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I loved it so much. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know where it was going to go. And there were so many times where it just seemed like, oh, maybe this is not going to happen. But I just didn't give up. Right. And maybe because I felt like I had no choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, one thing leads to another. And you play on one record that happens to be successful. And then all of a sudden, you know, and I was pretty lucky in the fact that when I've played on things that have done well, they were so wildly different from the next thing that, you know, I don't know. I've got to have a career now. I look back and it's like it's all over the map.
Right. I remember honestly one of the first times we worked together. Like I worked in studios a long time, and I always kind of kept a mental note of, oh, this session player is really cool. I really like how they play. And when you came in, it was like I want to say it was for a John Legend thing or something like, you know, R&B or something. But the track we were doing was more of a rock vibe, and you like busted into this crazy rock part, and I was like, dang, like he's really versatile, like you can do a lot of different things, so it's cool.
I felt lucky, I think, in the era that I grew up, and also, you know, I think about my mom in my house. She played a lot of different kinds of music, so I was exposed to a lot of different things, and I think that's important to have a lot of different gears, I call it, right? Because some players might be, you know, I'm the jazz guy, so I play real light.
Right.
Or I'm the rock guy, so I hit really hard.
Yep.
But if you can figure out how to have all the gears and, you know, go from that, it just makes it more valuable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what were some of those first records that kind of put you on the map?
I mean, I think the first one that was really big was the Avril Lavigne. That was like, I had played on cool records. I played on a Willie Nelson record. I played with Scott Weiland. I did things that were more cool. Chris Cornell record, But I
actually saw recently that you played on one of the first Queens of the Stone Age records.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
I've had a really weird all over the map kind of deal. Like
nice.
But yeah, the Avril Lavigne one was the first one that was like, okay, this is like massive. Really massive. And like you go into a grocery store and it's playing. And then you start getting a bunch of calls for things like that.
Right.
And then.
For sure. Went from there. Yeah. Nice. So one of the things I like to talk about a lot on the podcast is kind of how to inspire artists in the studio for, you know, to create great performances and everything else. And as a session musician, it's a little bit different than engineers per se, because you're part of, you know, that process. How do you approach understanding the artistic vision of the artist so you can maintain that?
I think really you have to take everything song by song, right? And really figure out what that song is saying and how do I convey the emotion of it. We talked about this before, right? It's like, it's something that doesn't get talked about that much, right? Because we focus so much on the technical aspect of things, right? And in this day and age, you want to see people like how they technically execute something. But there's this like unspoken thing of like, well, how do I convey an emotion, right?
Right.
So if I'm on a session and I'm with an artist and they're playing a song and it's like it's sad or it has this longing to it, how do I convey that in what I'm playing, right? It's like if I go in there and I start whipping out some crazy chops over it, it's like that's not conveying that emotion. So I think that's the thing. It's almost like being an actor or something where you have to put yourself in that role, and I have to. What is this song about? How do I get inside of that and then put that emotion across? And I think that's the thing that makes a difference, right? It's not, yes, you have to be able to execute.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, as a drummer, I need to hit consistently, right? My time needs to be good, right? But above and beyond all of that, I need to be able to convey an emotion so that makes the feel of the record. And a lot of times, that's playing in a way that you go unnoticed. And I always think that when I'm playing on a record, if you're noticing too much what I'm doing, I'm not doing my job.
Right.
They didn't hire me. It's not my record. It's not like,
Right. And the drums are kind of a supportive instrument.
It's a supporting role,
yeah.
And I like that.
That's cool. And how do you approach collaborating with engineers and producers to achieve the best results?
Same thing. I mean, luckily over time, I would say there's like, I've been given a level of trust with people that they'll go, I can hear a song and go, oh, it's this kind of song and I need this kind of sound, right? And that wasn't always the case. And so I hear a song and I go, oh, the drums should sound like this because that's the mood of it. But you do run into a thing where somebody else, a producer or an engineer, might have a very different view of it, right? And I remember running into that. I have run into that through the years. Like you might find a more, not old school, but like a guy of a certain era where they don't want you to put shit on the drums, right? Yeah. And I'm going, shit, well, this is how it would feel to me. And also, drums are funny that, like, how you treat a drum gives it a completely different vibe and a feeling of playing it, right? It physically feels different to play a drum that's wide open as opposed to one that's super dead, right? And so it's really, it's being able to adapt to all those scenarios, right? It's like, it's not just walking into something and going, oh, I'm just going to do this and this is all going to work out. Like I would say more nowadays, luckily, since I've been doing this so long, people are generally going to cast people, right? It's like the producer's like a director or something. He's going to cast people and go, oh, I know this guy is right for this, right?
Exactly.
But sometimes you just get cast because somebody said, and you show up and you're like, oh, shit. Okay, now I need to figure out how to do something that, initially is not how I would approach it, but I need to make this happen, right?
Right. No, that's very true. Like I know firsthand with working with different producers, like, your name will come up as like, oh yeah, we should get him because, we won't have to worry about anything. Like it'll be amazing, like he's the right guy, but then sometimes, if it is a totally different project, we are talking about different people because, the producer and I are very honed in on which feeling is going to be right. Not necessarily the technicality, but who's going to,
Yeah, and there are times that, somebody might call me for something and they'll tell me what it is, and I go, I'm not the right guy for this, right? It's like, oh,
I remember we were even on a session and we're saying that. It was like, okay, well, this is a little bit, different, so we need to try to adapt and,
Yeah, because I think, sometimes with all of it, you have to remove your ego from it a little bit, because I don't know, at this point too, I just feel like, help people get the job done that's right. And then when the thing that you're right for rolls around, they'll be like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And how important is active listening in the studio, and how do you ensure you fully understand the artist's expectations and preferences? It's a little bit what we're already talking about.
Yeah, you have to read it, and that's another skill set, is to read a room, read people, right, read the vibe, and you have to do it quickly. It's funny because I would say generally, if you're a session guy, you're not going to hear the music beforehand, right?
Or usually, yeah.
I would say, 80 to 90% of the time, there's not even a conversation. Somebody just says, hey, can you show up here on such and such a date? And you walk in and you're like, what's the vibe? Like, and all of a sudden you have to go, okay, all right, I'm this guy today. I'm rock guy today, or I'm sensitive guy today.
Yeah.
I'm like, anywhere in between.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to read it real quick and like have that sensibility. You have to be sensitive to what's going on.
And that's also one of my other questions is how do you prepare for that? Like sometimes, when you don't even know the track in advance, you have to bring a number of different, pieces of gear. Like you have to be prepared for all different
eventualities. So I have a cartage guy who brings I have a bunch of different stuff and then once I hear the song, I can go, oh, okay, it's these drums or this,
Nice.
Yeah, it's really funny. You really have to hone your intuition, right, and then be able to trust that. And how you do that, is just to be kind of familiar with a lot of different styles, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say for more modern things, it's funny. I'm lucky that I have a house full of teenagers, not normally stuff I would listen to, or even if, I hear something coming out of their bedroom. Oh, okay, that's all right. I get it.
Right.
I see what that vibe's about.
Nice. And how do you encourage artists to step out of their comfort zones and experiment with new ideas and taking risks?
I mean, I think part of the reason I get called now is that I will try different things, or I like weird sounds, or I've developed a thing, through the years, through watching my friend Tim Pierce, who's an amazing guitar player. I learned a lot from being on sessions with him and how he approaches things and how his initial track is super simple, and then he builds on top of it. And the thing I learned from him is that he said when he would do overdubs, he would start with the chorus.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, once I have the chorus happening, I know the rest is cake.
Right.
And so I started approaching drums that way, where I didn't need to make everything happen on the initial track. And as a matter of fact, it used to be, or there is a style where it's like, you really start bashing in the chorus, or the dynamic of it really changes, which is great for some things. But what's cool is when you can maybe, you can change the dynamic a bit, but if then with all your overdubs, you make that chorus really pop, right? Like by doing a bunch of things that all of a sudden come in that weren't there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that actually leads me to another topic I want to touch on is, you have your space here where you do a lot of remote recording for clients. How do you balance the actual technical aspect of engineering yourself with staying creative and staying inspired and struggling with technical difficulties?
Yeah.
And
it's funny. We were talking about that a little bit before. For years I've had studios where I had an engineer. I had an amazing engineer, Chris Steffen, right? And that was, or Vincent Jones at another place, that was an amazing luxury, right? Because then I didn't have to think about anything. It's like, just go play, and you have that. Now, really since the pandemic, changed everything for a lot of people. And I've had a lot of growing pains, just figuring out, and really the hardest ones being if somebody sent you a movie or a TV show where there's a lot of cues you have to get through, and opening a bunch of different sessions and file management and making sure everything goes, making sure all the mics are working, and when you start flying through things. And I have had things, I was just telling you, I had a thing where somebody needed something in a rush. It was like, and I knocked out 4 songs only to find out that one of the capsules in one of my overheads was out. And you go back and it's like, now I've really learned that after every take or everything, I'm looking at all my files, making sure all the things are there. And it's funny, that can slow the creative process down a little bit, right? And so sometimes in that event, I start backwards now, and I might do a lot of the percussion overdubs first so that I have that to play to.
Okay.
So that I know, like, you know, if I have to go back to the main track and redo something,
Right.
I've already kind of have my inspiration or the idea that was in my head before it gets away.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. It's like a kind of reminder of
Yes.
what you were inspired by.
Yeah, because there are things that happen. I would say that's the thing that is cool about technology, right? Like there was something amazing about tape, but there's also something amazing about, like, anytime I have an idea right now, I don't have to wait for the tape to rewind, but I can just go and do that idea right now as it strikes me.
Exactly.
But I also am super grateful that when I first started making records, it was on tape, and there was that pressure of, like, oh, I have to get this right. No one's going to go and quantize me or, like, you know, yes, you could fix some things, but, like, you had to play.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that, I'm grateful that I got to be in both worlds, have a view of that.
Absolutely. And how has that changed? I mean, obviously you probably weren't engineering as much back in those days, but how has technology changed your workflow?
I mean, what's crazy is you even think about, you know, even I would say, you know, early 2000s or even 2010, like the technology to be able to record at home, you could do it. You could have a bunch of great mic pre's, but now it's funny, like with the, you know, something like the universal audio stuff, it's like where you have, you know, plugins as your mic pre. The plugins sound great now. Yeah. Whereas, you know, a decade ago, they did not sound that good, right? Or you had crazy latency, or there were a lot of problems. So it's like the technology, you know, really was pretty life-saving during the pandemic to be able to just pivot quickly.
That's true.
And like, I mean, it really saved my ass and probably a lot of other people, my peers.
Yeah, definitely. Even myself, like I got a lot more mixing work during that time because people were locked down at home making music in their bedrooms and needed a mixer, you know.
And the barrier to entry is like, it's different now. Like, you know, instead of buying a rack of Neves for, you know, $10 bazillion, I could spend $2,000 or, you know, whatever and get.
Absolutely. You know, it's really good quality stuff for sure. For sure. And so when it comes to leaving a lasting impact, I know as a session musician, that's not always on your mind, but how do you help the artist to achieve that, you know, when you collaborate with them?
Yeah, I don't know that I've thought about that so much. I think about, you know, serving the song. Did I serve the song? Did I, like, make it so their vision came through? Did I, like, is the emotion there? That to me is the key, the weird unwritten thing. Right. Yes, technically I could walk in and play something, but did I make it so that, you know, that feeling comes across so that it, you know, it's they're excited about it, or, you know, and I don't know really how to explain that other than, like, you have to, like, be able, like an emotional chameleon and, like, be able to feel that stuff. For me, if I can't connect with something, I just don't think it's going to be very exciting or come across. And so I think the real trick is connecting with things that you wouldn't normally connect with.
Okay.
Right? And that's it. As a session person, you're going to play on some shit you don't like. Right? Or you're just like, man, this is not
It's not my
thing. How do I quickly get in this mindset? Right? How do I, you know, I always use the example of Skater Boy. From Avril Lavigne. Like, you know, I heard that song initially and I just go, Skater Boy, I'm not, you know, I'm not a skater boy. I don't, you know. But I, you know, I'm seeing there's a 16-year-old girl sitting there. She's there, and it's like she was excited about the song, and I was like, okay, I need to, like, put anything in my mind, any judgment, all of that aside. I need to, like, hop into her mindset, and get into it. And, like, I think that shit comes across even if you can't notice it. It's almost this, like, it's a feeling. Right. And then it connects with who it's supposed to connect with. It's not supposed to connect with, you know, I think I was like in my 30s at that time. It's not supposed to connect with a 30-year-old. I'm trying to be a 16-year-old girl here right now. Right?
Exactly. Nice. And along those same lines, how do you, what techniques and approaches do you use to help artists grow and evolve during the recording session?
I mean, that's interesting. I don't know. I think, if you're doing a record with somebody who's making their first record,
right.
There's little things you can, clues or tips. And it's funny how important headphones and headphone mixes are.
Right.
This is the thing that drives me crazy about some people that might have their own studio, that the headphones are like an afterthought.
Yeah.
When really, to me, it's the most important thing. And anytime I had a studio, it was so important to be able to get the right headphone mix, right?
Yeah,
because
definitely.
The thing that's interesting to me is you meet some players or young players where they'll have themselves so loud, louder than the click, louder than everything else. I'm like, if you're only listening to yourself, you're not having a conversation. Music has to be a conversation. If I'm only listening to myself and thinking about what I'm going to say, we're not having a conversation, right? And so having the right headphone mix, having being able to hear all the things you're supposed to interact with.
Right.
Or maybe you're on something where it's like, oh man, I can't feel that, so you got to get way out of my mix. You got to be, or I need more of this, right? I think those things are super important in the recording process, right?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide for creating massive snare sounds. In it, I go over all my techniques, from drum choices, tuning, microphone placements, even mixing techniques. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/huge snare. And now, back to the show. From your perspective as a session musician, what advice would you give to engineers and producers to better collaborate and get the best performances from session musicians?
I think it's funny because there are some producers and engineers that make you feel really comfortable and really confident, right? If I feel comfortable and confident, then I'm relaxed and I know I'm in a safe place that I can try a bunch of different ideas and I can fail. Right? Because maybe it's not going to work. Not every idea is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But if you're in a safe place, if I feel like the producer trusts me, the engineer trusts me, then I can try all these different kinds of things. And then we have a dialogue. And then I think you come up with something exciting. If you're doing anything out of a place of fear, like, oh, maybe they're not going to like this, or maybe they don't like me, or like all that, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Then you kind of clam up and you're afraid to say something, and really maybe then you're passing by good ideas or things that could take it to another place.
Exactly.
Yeah, my favorite producers and engineers are ones that make everybody in the session feel really comfortable and confident.
Right. And what are some common misconceptions and misunderstandings that you think engineers and producers might have about working with session musicians?
I mean, I think now if you've been doing it, like, it's funny, it's gotten so much harder to make records or get into that same place that, most people I work with, they're pretty great and they know what they're doing and they know how to get the best out of people. But I think casting again, right? Cast the right people for the job. Make sure you've gotten the right people. And generally, if you've made it to the level of actually being a session person, they know you're going to have a lot of different sounds. They know you're going to have a lot of different gear. Like having the right gear for a job is super important, right? Being able to get the right sounds, or if somebody goes, oh, I hear it this way, you know how to get that sound, right? Fast, instead of like, oh shit, we need to call, wait, big panic, we need to call in,
Exactly.
We need to rent more shit, somebody that is actually deemed a session person they'll know how to get that sound for you, or
for sure. And what about live shows? I mean, how do you prepare for those versus the studio? How does it vary?
It's just such a different beast, right? It's a different beast. And again, I've had the luxury of the last, I don't know if it's 13, 14 years of playing with the same artist, with Alanis Morissette. And, she's so amazing and makes everybody feel super comfortable. You're allowed to be yourself. And so that is just fun, and you can, I don't know, it feels free, and I know not everything is like that. Yeah. Right.
Do you play live stuff with anyone else, or? Mainly just her?
Every once in a while, but not too much.
Yeah.
Like I would say really it's like studio and her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice. And what are some current or recent projects that you're allowed to talk about, if you don't mind?
Well, I think we were talking about there's the Bob Dylan movie that's probably on hold till this writer's strike is over.
Oh, right. Jeez.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'll think of a lot of cool things after this, I'm sure. But like, there's always different things
that have been released recently. Let's say.
Released.
Yeah, that you're allowed to talk about.
It's funny. It's interesting. There's a lot of country things that I've been.
Oh, really?
New. Yeah, and I guess the last big thing was the Lizzo.
Okay.
About Damn Time. That was pretty exciting, and I love working with that producer, Ricky Reed.
Nice.
He's really awesome.
Nice.
And again, like somebody who knows how to get the best out of people, make you feel comfortable,
right,
and have fun. Yeah, if you can make something fun for something and you feel free to try things, you're going to come up with stuff that's really cool.
Exactly. You know? Yeah. Nice. And so I like to wrap up with the same set of questions each time. First one is, who is your most influential teacher?
It's outside of music. It would be my sponsor, Sonny Duran, who's, I'm a recovery guy, have been for a long time.
All right.
In October, I'll be celebrating 26 years.
Nice.
And I would have to say it's things that I learned in the program that have made me be able to be, I don't know, the person that I am now.
Right.
Like to show up for things and the way I approach things and try to approach things with love.
Right.
And just be, I don't know. So nice. It's too much to go into.
Yeah, of course.
But there's something about just enjoying life and the love of life and appreciating all the ups and downs,
right,
and the emotional highs and lows, and that you can bring to music,
right?
Where it's not, it's just love.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. And this one may not apply to you, but I like to ask, what is your favorite reference track for engineers to go to a new studio to learn? But in your case, what would be something you put on to be inspired?
It would be Donny Hathaway, I Love You More Than I'll Ever Know, live at the bitter end.
Okay.
There's something so amazing about that track that I can hear just the opening chord and it just puts me in a mood.
Right. Nice.
And I think it's funny. I tell a lot of drummers that might reach out to me to like listen to that track and play along with that track. It's super slow.
Yeah.
It's super hard to play to because it's so laid back,
right,
and it's just so open. And just
nice.
Try and play to that.
All right. Awesome. And last question is, what's one tidbit for an upcoming engineer, but in your case could be a session drummer?
Well, I think also as I am
as you're an engineer
my own engineer,
exactly.
I just think like my favorite engineers are the ones that were always like willing to just try something different, right? Because I think it is important to know the rules, right? We know we don't want things out of phase, or sometimes maybe you do want something out of phase, right? But then to just try to like, just be open-minded. I think the great era of recording to me is really like in the late 60s and 70s where people were just trying different things. Like have an open mind. There's more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak. Like you just try different things. Be open to that. Like, don't be so set in your ways that like, I try to tell my kids this, if you stop learning, you're fucked. You'll always be a student.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And I approach that with recording, with playing drums. Like if I think that I know that I've got this, then I'm fucked. Right? If I'm not still learning how to do new things, I'm fucked. Right?
Exactly.
So just keep learning.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time yet again to record this with me.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Sweet.
Thanks so much for checking out the show. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review or comment.
I'll see you next week.